Today on Listen Up, we're celebrating. It's our 300th show, and we take the opportunity to look back on where we've come from and reflect on what we've learned. That's next. Welcome to Listen Up. And no, I'm not Lorna Dueck. I'm Denise Lottie, a former producer of this show who's been invited back to help Listen Up look back. You see, the team that brings you the spiritual look behind the headlines each week is celebrating. They're celebrating a milestone, Listen Up's 300th show. And while producers, researchers, camera people, and directors have come and gone over the 8 years, there is one member of the team that has remained constant, Lorna Dueck. So today we're going to tip our hats to Lorna, who conceived and birthed this national weekly spiritual look behind the headlines. And we're going to have a little bit of fun in the process. We'll look back at some of her favorite shows, see some outtakes that never quite made it to air, and we'll include a couple of surprises too. But first, we're going to allow Lorna the chance to reflect a bit as I occupy the host seat and put her on the hot seat for a change. Well, congratulations, Lorna. 300 shows. Did you ever think you would make it this far?
Well, there's a whole big bunch of people behind 300 shows. It's not just Lorna. Right now, there's 7 of us on staff, and there's a volunteer cadre. There's 42 prayer partners, and there's 450 donors. It's a big deal. So it's not just Lorna. And a lot of people do 300 things more than once. But this is different because it takes a whole team like that to do it. And no, I never thought I would.
Yeah, but this really was your vision that, let's just go back to that moment where you got this idea to bring the spiritual headlines, or the spiritual look behind the headlines.
I always had that, and that came as a young mom. As I would read my newspaper, I would just say there's got to be something about God in the news, because I just felt our whole world was held together by God. Why don't we ever talk about those realities? But it was my boss, David Maines, who, as I was co-hosting with him, I was always kind of like the dripping tap on, we got to talk about God in the news, that he said, David said, make it a show, Lorna, do it a show. And I remember George McEachran, the senior producer of Huntley Street, and I walking around thinking of names and listen to the world, look up. And that's what it was meant to be.
Right, and the name has stayed the same, but the show has changed over 8 seasons.
You know, when it started, it was actually a setup for 100 Huntley Street to open its phone lines to its viewers. We were supposed to ask a provocative question, something going on in the news, and then David opened the phone lines, and with his on-staff psychologist, Chuck Borsellino, they would just answer the world's problems about that news issue we raised. It was cool.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the first show that you put together. What was that like?
It was a nail biter. It was an absolute nail biter because it had to be news, so you couldn't get it ready too far ahead of time. And it had to be significant news. And I'll remember George telling me, if you don't come up with something hot, this thing is over. And it was like we hadn't even started. And I felt like it was a really big weight. And then President Clinton in 1998 made great headlines for me because I was able to go out and ask young people, what does the behavior of the world's leading political figure have on your sense of right and wrong? And so it was a fascinating show on right and wrong as it comes down to us from role models. And of course, that was President Clinton and the Lewinsky scandal. And that was our first show. And it was a nail biter. And I remember that we also had help from Andrew Grenville at Ipsos Reid, helped us do the polling properly. So it was like, we did great.
Okay, well, let's go to a clip from that first show, and it was called Impeachable Behavior, and it was about the Monica Lewinsky-Bill Clinton scandal. Let's have a look.
Something brand new for 100 Huntley Street. Once a week, it's called Listen Up, and here's Lorna Dueck.
We know it as modeling. Our actions shape the world for those who follow. Youth Culture Specialist Paul Robertson is here. He's an advisor for parents and teenagers about social learning and the impact it has on us. Hi, Paul.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks for coming to Listen Up. And I am really amazed at the polling data when 78% of teenagers say the most influential, powerful person in the world is not a good role model. What does it mean for us?
Well, I think, Bill Clinton has always been concerned about what kind of a legacy is he going to leave after he leaves office. And he's going to leave many legacies. Several of them aren't going to be positive. And I think one of the legacies he's going to take with him is the fact that he has let down a whole generation of young people when it comes to being the role model that the most powerful man in the United States should be.
When Listen Up returns, we'll continue our walk down memory lane in a lighter vein. Never before seen bloopers and outtakes. Next. Welcome back to Listen Up, and I'm here talking to host Lorna Dueck. Lorna, it's been 300 shows. What are some of the biggest lessons you've learned in doing this show?
Wow, it's always about the people you work with. It's always about working well with each other, listening to each other. It's also about going with your instincts. Like, it's just your curiosity matters. Your questions matter. Your sense of people. Character. I think life's most interesting stories are about character, what comes out of people.
And you've obviously met some pretty interesting characters over the years. Tell me about some of the highlights for you.
Oh, wow. Every show has fascinating, beautiful people in them. I remember the father who pushed through a child protection bill because, he'd lost his young son in a horrific crime, and just persisted 10 years later before he could see the law that made a sense and a meaning out of his son's death. I remember fascinating people like Yiana in Sierra Leone. She was 16 years old and watched rebels put a gun to her parents' head. And she just said to her mom and dad, "Mom and Dad, don't you remember Psalm 91? Has God not said?" And she just preached the sovereignty of God to her family in this life-threatening situation. And you remember things like that. I remember, I think obviously that the work you get to do as listening in on compassion is a huge blessing. It's a beautiful benefit to see those kinds of people. Obviously, getting to skirt around some of the famous Hollywood stuff is also kind of intriguing and fascinating. Mel Gibson's movie, The Passion, that whole time Listen Up was invited to be the only television journalist in Canada to come down to the Hollywood screening and set of that, and to be able to talk with Jim Caviezel, who played the role of Jesus in such a dramatic way. And
that's a great example of where news and faith intersect. But it's not always so obvious, is it, to find that spiritual look behind the headlines?
No, and that is, I would say, is getting over the 300 shows. It's getting more difficult. I think that things...
Why is that?
Well, because I think our lives are more complex, and I think we've become somewhat more neutral about what's black and white, and we've also become a very world community, and we understand what are the complexities of why this is wrong for somebody and it's right for somebody else. And I think the whole biblical worldview, the idea that God has a plan for our lives, God has safeguards, God has directives about how we should live in this world, are just getting increasingly marginalized in a very noisy world.
And how are you bringing that worldview back into the media mainstream?
Well, I would like to think that by choosing topics that people are talking about, like right now, things that really matter to us. This is an unusual program for us to be looking at this, but for example, I thought we were really one of the only programs that was privileged to pull a whole, not just 1/2 hour, but 2 half hours out of what happened with the Amish tragedy. When this was a headline, everybody was talking about a horrific shootout in an Amish schoolroom. We had the ability to really go in and say, well, why would people live with a biblical ethic of forgiveness in the face of such a crime? Why would they even separate themselves to follow the call of Jesus? And what does he ask on our lives? That kind of situation was phenomenal to me. to be able to, as quickly as something is happening, let's say in Afghanistan or Iraq, to be able to analyze and ask, what would God's heart be for those people? What's happening in the Sudan, I wish I could tell that story every week. There are some things like this, and you just have to kind of play that tension that viewers aren't interested in the world's problems. But if you get an excuse like we had a few weeks ago, like a movie Blood Diamonds comes out, it gives you a wonderful opportunity in popular culture to say, look at the deeper issues that a movie like that raises.
How do you get to the heart of the story, God's heart for the story?
I guess I ask a couple of questions. I look to see, where is there, or is there anything in this idea that separates people from God? Because I think God's biggest heart for the world is a relationship. God doesn't want us floating along unaware that we are loved and cared for, and that there are peaceful, beautiful ways for us to choose to follow his life. And so as soon as I'm looking at a story, I'm wondering, where would that run opposite to what the Bible says God wants for our life? That's probably the first thing I'm looking for.
And what have been the things that have surprised you the most as you look into these things, into these events and people?
The human ability to live out the love of God. The ability that God, no matter how difficult a situation, can still be found and discovered. Like, I could not walk away from the love of God now after doing this kind of journalism for the last 14 years, specifically on television now. I could not walk away simply journalistically on the evidence that I've seen when you ask the question, how do you know God was in this story? I couldn't walk away. Like, look at, can we look at the story of Gladys Staines and her daughter Esther, whose kids, brothers, father murdered in a Jeep because they were living out the love of God to leper victims.
In India, that's right.
Yeah. And here's what they have to say, is that God holds them through this. And then she goes back and opens a hospital.
Yeah. And these are really not stories that you would otherwise hear, are they?
No, there's stories that seem to get shuffled off the mainstream. They're stories that aren't crying out for the public press. You have to go look for them. And they also don't fit in the mainstream discussion. And I think that's the beauty of a program like Listen Up. It gets the opportunity to listen to what's God's heart in the world.
Okay, Lorna, so far we've let you off easy, but it's time for a little bit of fun. The serious business of television news and current affairs often has a lighter side, normally unseen by the folks at home. Take a look.
Well, it seems every TV show, even ours, has a little pull with home renovation sponsorships when great volunteers are involved. Oh, I'm forgetting the ending. Wait till you see what happens. Okay, all right. In ways that will never, sorry, one more time. Okay. Oh no, oh. Oh no. Blank, okay, got him. We're joined now by the High Commissioner of Australia to Canada, High Commissioner William Fisher. Hello, High Commissioner.
How are you today?
High Commissioner. High Commissioner, thank you very much. That clarifies it for us, and we appreciate you joining us from Ottawa. High Commissioner Peter Williams. Sorry, no, I've got the wrong name there. You know, my producer's husband's name is Peter Williams. I'm so sorry.
Coming up, we've got some surprises for Lorna as we look back over the past 299 shows. Stay tuned.
Really?
Yes, surprises. You don't even know about it.
Closed captioning provided by Duca Financial Services Credit Union. Discover more affordable banking at duca.com.
Welcome back. Well, Lorna, one thing I wanted to ask you, do you have an all-time favorite show?
You know what? They blend together. A few favorites blend together, but I think the most there's probably three that are in my top three, but one of them definitely was being on Hurricane Katrina, right at location at ground, the eye of the hurricane there in Waveland, Mississippi. And that was so special because you got to see the complete brokenness of a society just like, you know, your neighborhood next door that had learned to be very self-sufficient, wiped out by the power of nature. You know, it was just a phenomenal thing to see 85% of these homes wiped out, and then people responding after they've lost everything, realizing, you know, this one gentleman we interviewed had lost his mother. Like, he'd taken his mother away to what he thought was safety, and she ends up dying. He swims through the disaster. You see this enormous recovery of people reaching in. You see families like Veronica's. I'll always remember Veronica. We continue to keep her in our prayers. We made a Listen Up photo album for this family, and you know, it's just one example of what incredible stuff the human spirit has to recover. But what probably amazed me most was the role that the church played. I'd never been in a disaster scene that the church had been there so much quicker and so much more effectively than the military, than the disaster relief, than the federal government. And here was McDonald's, the world's largest food franchise, unable to feed a person, and you have three churches from 200 miles away, small churches, pulling together, setting up this enormous tent and feeding thousands of people, spending $25,000 a day, just counting on God to send it in from across the country. I was really, that was a really great experience to just watch and listen to the human spirit.
You're really
respond.
a witness when you're there, aren't you?
Yeah.
Your job is to go to the ground and to report. But how do you kind of protect yourself from just the devastation that you see around you?
You don't. You come home and you cry your eyes out. Like you have your own reactions to it, and I don't think you need to really. You shouldn't be too protective. You should really feel it. Like another of my very favorite stories was going up to Labrador and being under this starry canopy of Canada's north, and this beautiful family of 7 sisters taking me into their tent in their, you know, this beautiful little place way out in the back of the woods, and we sat down and talked about why had gas sniffing taken, you know, 39 of their young teenagers in this small village of Sheshashi. You know, I sat down and I wept with elders on why had the priest sexually abused their children? What could be done to, you know, you just shouldn't protect yourself too much from feeling people's pain and bringing that back. And here were this beautiful Innu community asking us in the South to pray for them.
Well, and you really have championed Native issues. Why is that?
Well, it's an open wound on Canada's heart for justice, and it is right beside us. I mean, scenes from Caledonia, which is currently, you know, what's it gone into? It's a full year now of a horrible dispute that is only 15 minutes from the studio I tape in. And I know that pastors who pray here every Wednesday are the only reason bullets have not fired here.
Well, you've covered 300 shows now. Where do you see Listen Up going?
Well, I pray we can really be of a gift that helps people who do not know God or are not interested in God understand that God is interested in them. I hope we can continue to learn to ask the questions, listen to the stories about the things that matter to people that really need to hear it. I think you're going to see some interesting new things happen eventually on the website, some new ways of interacting with people. And I think we're going to increasingly listen to the contrarian and find out why, you know, what will it mean for us to be neighbors even though we don't agree? What will it mean to be respectful of each other?
Well, Lorna, on that theme, there is something about this business that leads people to form close bonds and fast friendships. And Lorna, there are many people over the years who have been associated with Listen Up and who call you friend. So we want to sit back and listen to what they had to say.
Way to go. You know, over the years, I've seen your passion for faith, and I've seen your passion for the news that shapes the world around us and putting that together. So I think I've got a great perspective to say congratulations, way to go. We'll look forward to the next 300.
Lorna, congratulations on your 300th telecast of Listen Up. I can still remember almost 8 years ago sitting in your office while you were with us at 100 Huntley Street and discussing your desire to bring the news and faith together to our nation. And we were wondering, now what could we name this segment, which eventually turned out to be a full program? And I remember us discussing, you know, we need to listen to God. We need to listen up. And so became the name of the telecast, Listen Up. Lorna, I just want to congratulate you as you bring the newspaper in one hand and the Bible in another hand, bringing it together to bring relevancy to the gospel to the nation of Canada. Congratulations, Lorna.
Hi, Lorna. I am so happy to be here celebrating your 300th show. Who could believe it in those early days? I probably joined you 5 or 6 months into your time with Listen Up, and it was just me and you. How did we ever do a whole show with just the two of us? I have no idea. But I remember so much time that you and I spent praying. Sometimes we didn't know if the money was going to come in to keep the show going. Sometimes we didn't know if we were going to get a guest in time for the next day. It was just crazy years. But it's been so good to see how faithful God is, and your hard work has paid off. You're here at 300 shows. And you know, I've said this to you personally, Lorna, and I want to say it publicly, just to thank you for all that you've given to my life, that I would not be doing what I am doing today, mixing faith with the news, if I hadn't learned from you just how to do that in a way that has journalistic credibility and brings all the elements of my faith into it. And so I want to thank you for that, and thank you for what you've given to Canada. And I'm looking forward to being here on the 600th show and congratulating you for that. So thanks again, Lorna.
You've never missed hitting the target. Bullseye most of the time, Lorna Dueck, in these years of 300 Listen Up telecasts. Those years that we worked together on 100 Huntley Street are years of fond memory for me. And, well, I remember, of course, picking up the Winnipeg Free Press and seeing an article that you did on the front page and thinking, I'm going to keep an eye on this young lady. And then, of course, I went out to Winnipeg, met you, and the rest is history. And Listen Up began, and now you're carrying that great effort forward into the future. God bless you, Lorna.
Hi, Lorna. From all of us at the Village Salon, we congratulate you on your 300th show. Wishing you continued success.
Hi, Lorna. And our goal for 2007 will be to continue making you look great. See you soon. And may God bless. Ciao.
Ciao.
Hey Lorna, congratulations on your 300th episode. I wish you continued success. I'd like to thank you for coming in and supporting the store and bringing in your coworkers, your friends and family. It's been wonderful working with you and with all your friends, and we hope to see more of you. So good luck, God bless, and I wish you all the best. Thanks, Lorna. Take care.
Congratulations, Lorna, on your 300th show!
And as a former producer, Lorna, I would just like to give you my congratulations as well as you continue to probe this spiritual behind the headlines.
Well, thank you very much. And it is all about getting help from great professionals like you and the ones here, and David Maines, who let me begin this and challenged me and grew it, provided a safe umbrella to launch out from, and it's really an amazing thing to be part of a big team that makes this happen.
And your team is here. They have a cake for you to celebrate. So let's.
Oh, that is so beautiful. Thank you, Sandra. That is just great. Thank you. Thank you, Gloria. That's great. And behind the camera, there's a few too. Yeah. Darren, Dave, Melinda, thank you so much. Oh, this is just beautiful.
Any last words, Lorna?
To God be the glory, and let's keep going.
When Listen Up returns, Lorna reflects on 300 shows and what they've meant to her. Oh, you guys, isn't that amazing? Blue flowers.
Well, there's a favorite Bible verse in Ephesians 2, verse 10, which says, God has designed good things for us to do. And I want to thank my crew for surprising me today with the show and joining me on the good things that God has designed for all of us to do. And I can speak from the heart to say 300 programs would have missed the mark if we hadn't introduced you to the reality that Jesus Christ has a personal plan for your life too. It's not just those of us who are motivated to love God, to know Him, to be curious enough to say, how does that work, and put it on a TV program. It is something very personal for your life at home, for your life at work, for your life with your family, with your marriage, with your kids. And it begins by that beautiful, simple prayer of saying, God, I need you. Come in, live in my heart, and take over and be the number one in my life. It's an opening prayer to a great adventure. Listen Up has more of this kind of Christian discovery on our website at listenuptv.com. There's a lot of people I need to say thank you to. All 477 of you who are on our giving base that make a program like this a possible gift to a very wide world. To the 7 different broadcasting outlets who air us 23 times a week. To the many mentors and prayer partners, to the producers and coaches who've gone on to work in other venues but have been a big part of shaping how I'll listen to the world. And to an amazing crew of 7 who shows up every day for work and just says, how can we do this together? Thank you for listening to the world, for looking up every week with me. I'm Lorna Dueck. Thanks for joining us on this special episode of our 300th edition of Listen Up.